Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 7 o'clock on the dot. Yep, 7 o'clock on the dot. PM. This is the regular meeting of the Kaneland Board of Education. We would like to inform all board meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of tonight's meeting's conclusion. I wanted to start by welcoming all our new guests, I was going to say, but I'd like to welcome all our new family because I feel that that's how it is. So thank you all for coming. At this point, let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and let's see. Before the roll call, Board Member Kleisner will be attending this meeting via conference call, which is allowable per Board Policy 220. And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Kleisner.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
All right, and with 7 members present, we have a quorum. At this time, is there anything that the board would like to move from consent agenda to new business? No. There is an amendment to the agenda. We will need to amend tonight's current agenda to include the Illinois Open Meetings Act, Section 2C11, for litigation under closed session. One other thing that will be brought up, we did have as a topic for future agenda, the discussion of the first responder services to KHS, but there's more research needed and some due diligence on our part before we proceeded. And so in order to make the discussion as productive as possible, we're going to go ahead and put it off to future agendas, but it is in the works. So with that being said, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So move.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
All right, motion carries 7-0. It's now time for the board and superintendent salutes, and I will turn it over to Dr. Layden.
Yes, thank you. It is really nice to see all of our new staff members here, or a number of our new staff members are invited. We typically will start our school year with a new staff member meet and greet. And with that, I would like to have a mini salute to Dr. Adkins and Kathy Navigato, who helped put this together to invite all of our new staff members here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Adkins, and if you could please share and recognize our new staff.
Absolutely. So first, thank you all for coming out tonight. As President Gonzalez said, that this is welcoming family. He's right. I kind of call that the Kaneland way. It's very neat to see people coming to the district because it feels like family. It feels like home. I didn't hear a staff member say, oh, you know, I really like this very objective, maybe our payroll or how well or efficiently our human resources office runs or anything like that. It was, I feel like I'm helping kids. I feel like I like the people I work with. I feel like I make a difference. That's the Kaneland way. We hired 77 people this year, 43 something teachers, 17 support staff, some administrators. It was quite a hectic hiring season for us. Right now we only have one open position. If anyone knows a certified school nurse, please call me. Let me know. Actively recruiting, but in hearing from some of our surrounding districts in the area with double-digit or even triple-digit openings, I feel very blessed that we have a district people want to come to. So if you're new here and you're here tonight, please stand. We'd like to recognize you and make sure that everyone at home on the internet can see you. So make sure you turn and wave real quick at the camera. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for joining the Kaneland team. Thank you for being our newest Knights. And now with this salute being done, this would be the time where, as our newest Knights, you can head off home to get ready for tomorrow. And thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for coming out, taking the time to meet us. It was fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That was all we had for salutes for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that being done, we will move on to the consent agenda. So tonight's consent agenda includes the following action items. Approval of accounts payable and payroll, September 2023. Approval of minutes for the September 11th, 2023 regular meeting. Approval of personnel. Approval of 2022-2023 administrative and teacher salary and benefit report informational items. The student suspension data report and the Freedom of Information Act report. Those last two were informational items, forgive me. So at this time, I'll entertain a roll call to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
All right. 7-0. Okay, so at this point, we're gonna move on to the first opportunity for public comments, and looks like we have a couple signed up. Okay, so just a reminder, we use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. The board does not debate or engage in conversation during this time. I'd like to remind everyone to state your name and village of residence or association with the district for the record. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. Those who speak are asked to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. So at this time, we will have Mr. Stalka.
Hi, Scott Stalkup, parent, 3 kids in the district from Sugar Grove. I got the SBG survey. I appreciate that you guys sent that out, and would ask if, I don't know how the response is, but if it's a weak response, send it out, reach out to the members of the FAC, the CAC, the other boards to make sure you're getting a good sampling would be my request. Just so you get a good measure of the entire district, everybody all the way across all the different disciplines, the graduates, the alumni that have gone through it, the current students, everybody. If you're struggling with that or you're not getting a good response, I don't know the cutoff date, I don't remember that, but if you're not, reach out and engage with the PTOs and any of those entities to ask for assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stalka, for your comments. At this time, I'd like to invite anyone else who'd like to come up and speak. We have some time. Yes, sir.
My name's Chris Sutton. I live in Sugar Grove. I got 3 kids in the district in 3 different schools. Just want to make a comment about the last school board meeting that we had. I think, if I'm being honest, I think the district has a branding problem. I think when we brought that outside data analytics agency that came in, that was talking about, hey, whether we, in March or in November, whether it's a primary or a general election, will that get better results? If it's a primary stakeholder, do we need to ask people if they're aware of what's in there? Do we have to send out mailers? What the problem is? I think it's more of a branding problem, less than a timing problem. I think there's a disconnect between the administration and or maybe former board and the community. I think there's a few different things that have caused that. I would say, over the last few years, I think COVID was one thing that disconnected primary stakeholders, which is students or parents rather, and staff from the administration. I think they lost a lot of faith with that. I think the other thing that was talked about was the Ignite Academy. I think Ignite Academy isn't something that's pretty expensive. I remember Scott was asking about what that cost is in the breakdown. I think as far as the community goes, the community is not really in favor of Ignite Academy because it's expensive. We have a ton of bills that are paid. I've been in the last couple of board meetings, and it's the parking lot or it's the track, or you're hearing about all these different things that need to get done. And then we're spending money on that. I think the community as a whole looks at that and goes, that's kind of pricey. I'm not so sure that's a great idea. So I think there's some concerns there. I think lastly, standard-based grading is something that's pretty unpopular amongst many of the parents. I know I've had a few instances where it's, and I know a couple of you are aware of the situation, but there was teacher bias and the grade was ultimately changed. My son just now had a 27 out of a 30, which equated out to a 3, and he can't retake it, and I can't figure out how to translate that in some point for transcripts. I think in general, that is something that is pretty much unpopular. And I think when the board then goes and says, hey, we've got a referendum, trust us, we'd like $57 million from the community, yet the things that the community is continually saying isn't really being addressed. It's not necessarily that we don't understand it. It's that I feel like there's a disconnect. And I think once the board and the administration align themselves more with the community, whether that's instead of saying, hey, maybe we should have parents come in and we'll talk to them about the referendum. Maybe it's go out to where the parents are and the community is in one of their events, and maybe get yourselves immersed within the community and hear some of the things that the community is saying. Because right now, and believe me, I would like to see that referendum pass. I actually voted yes for it, but I think there is an absolute disconnect between the community and Kaneland from a branding perspective. Until that brand is repaired, I think we're going to end up in the same results that we were in the last time that referendum was brought up. So I would just ask the board administration to think about that as we move forward. So thanks for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Anyone else want to take this opportunity, Chris? There'll be another opportunity near the end of the meeting, so if something comes up, we'll take part then. Okay, the only item of new business is the public hearing and approval of the Kaneland e-learning plan. As a reminder, public hearings are structured to allow for public comment after a brief overview. Then the public comment period closes and the Board of Education can discuss prior to a motion. So it is 7:12 and I am going to call the public hearing on the Kaneland CUSD 302 e-learning plan to order. Dr. Layden, could you please provide more information?
Yes, thank you. And just as a reminder with this process, President Gonzalez and the board and audience members, the public hearing, I'm going to go over through some of the legalities of the e-learning plan and what that entails. And then Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh will talk through the practical side of that. Then at that point, if there are public comments on the plan itself, people then can come up and share the plan. Then when the hearing is closed, then the Board of Education can address questions that you might have regarding that plan. And to move forward with any e-learning plan that any district would have, this year, now based on updated guidance and state regulations, it does need to be Board of Education approved. Okay, so the first thing I want to share is just that during COVID, under the emergency declaration, districts had more latitude in which to come up with e-learning plans, and in some instance, we had no choice but to do that with different learning models and different practices we had to put in place during that time period. But now with COVID being behind us to a large degree, now it reverts back to the pre-COVID guidelines. And part of those guidelines are this public hearing that we have tonight and having board action. So it is required for board action to approve this plan. The plan also required several other steps as far as a public notice in the newspaper, which we had to provide as we do with all public notices. We do have to have it once the board approves it. It can't be utilized for 30 days. So if it's approved tonight as presented, the first time we could use it would be October 26th or anytime thereafter. This plan is good for 3 years based on the state statute. And one of the other things we would do, as we were going to do last year, we shared this at CAC last year. In the spring, one of our April CAC topics was to review how this plan went last year. But due to last year's weather, we didn't implement any emergency days last year, so we don't have a working background from last year to utilize it. It's largely the same plan from last year. Schedule, a few things are a little bit different because some items have changed, and those are some of the items that Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh will fill us in on. And one of the other things we will do is, if we do end up utilizing the e-learning days for any of our emergency days, we will make sure that we touch base with staff and touch base with students, especially to look at attendance, because if we do utilize it, our goal is to utilize it to continue the current continuum of learning. But if we find out that attendance isn't as much as we would like, then what we would do is be able to shift and then go back to traditional snow days if needed. And again, this is a plan that is outlined. And based on the state guidance, we can use it for 3 years at a maximum. But at a minimum, if there are changes that need to be made, we could always re-implement or resubmit changes to the Board of Education for approval based on what we learn when we actually put it into practice. Okay, so with that, as part of the continued public hearing piece, I'll turn it over to Mr. Raleigh and Dr. Mumm. Then when they're done, at that point, if there are any public comments, that's when the public could share.
Thank you guys for your time. We want to take a look a little bit about the logistics behind the plan and then what this experience would look like for our staff members and our students. So a little bit of the highlights. We really wanted to, when we dug into what the learning experiences for our students were going to be, we wanted to try to replicate that day of learning as closely as possible to what our students would experience if they were here in our school walls. So this would be used in lieu of what traditionally were snow days. If we can determine this by a certain time, and we'll talk about that in the bullet points to come. It could be used for extreme heat days that we saw earlier in the school year. We did not implement this during that most recent one. As Dr. Layden had said, it needs to be board approved, so we weren't able to do so. But this plan could and would replace the snow days that then are made up at the end of the school year. And there's a bit of a time in order to make sure that our teachers are best prepared for that day. We used 8:00 p.m. that day as the cutoff. So if it were today by 8:00 on a Monday, if we knew that inclement weather was on its way, we could call an e-learning day. We would broadcast that out to our community. Teachers would have some time to prep materials, but it's also built into our schedule on the day itself. And we would be able to do this a little bit more proactively than we have in the past. If that weather happens to come after 8 p.m., if it comes overnight, if it comes at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, where we used to have our district leadership actually going out and checking the roads that early, we would just institute a snow day, a typical snow day, where that would not be a day of attendance, it would not be a day of learning, and then that day would get tacked on to the end of the school year. We are trying to, as we go into some of the details of this plan, we really want to replicate what students' experiences would be should the weather never happen. It's a tough debate whether or not to do that at home synchronously or to make that up at the end of the school year. I think there's pros and cons, and when we weighed all of those out together, we thought that the plan that we have in place to continue the learning, continue the momentum that students have would be what is best for our students. So starting with our students, taking a look at what their experiences will be and what the expectations are, we have essentially two groups. We have our early childhood through first grade students that have a unique day. And then we have our 2nd through 12th grade students. And the reason those were set apart is that we have technology devices for our 2 through 12th grade students. Our EC, early childhood and first grade students, do not have those. What our EC through first grade students do have is what we are deeming a blizzard bag, which would be a little bit funny if we have to institute this for a heat day. But essentially that bag looks at, there's a lot of front-loaded work that our teachers have done looking at the typical sequencing of instruction, about where in a school year certain activities fall, and they've done a lot of planning, gathering supplies, and they've built physical bags for our students to take home. So if we're looking at a snowstorm coming through and we know that's expected, we are able to deliver these bags out to students and they can take them home, and that becomes their self-guided work throughout that day. In addition to that time, if you can see in that second bullet point, because they are not going in and out of Google Meets, they are essentially doing that work with the guidance of a caretaker at home. There are also office hours that are built in for our EC through first grade teachers. So our teachers will have an obligation to hold office hours where a parent can contact them if they have questions about an assignment, how to do something. So there's the blizzard bag they'll be working on linked to office hours that our teachers will hold. Our early childhood schedule is a little bit different than our kindergarten through 12th grade students, and EC does not meet on Fridays. So if an emergency day was called on a Friday, that would just be a typical non-attendance day for those EC students. our first graders would just engage in the blizzard bags. So then our 2nd through 12th grade students, they would go through a school day schedule that is pretty closely aligned to what their day looks like already. Some of that time might be shortened a little bit, specifically at the 6th through 12th grade grade spans. What we wanted to do is make sure that students, when they woke up and realized that there would be a synchronous day of learning, we wanted to make sure that they had time to find an appropriate place to learn for the day, find a quiet spot, get their materials together. It also allowed our teachers to kind of organize their day, even though they may have known about it from, before 8 p.m. the day before. This is actually getting the materials per class period ready, or getting attendance pulled up, or whatever they may need. So there's a little bit of a difference in schedules, which we will send out. Those are marked in our full plan. But our students would then go from class period to class period through a Google Meet link that is shared out through by our teachers. There will be activities that are linked into Canvas, which is our learning management system, which the majority of our students do have some experience using. As they get older, that's typically what they do on a daily basis. So the assignments will be posted to Canvas. They will be engaging through a live teacher. Our expectations for our students will be that their cameras are turned on, that they're in front of their cameras and they can be seen by their teachers, and they're engaging. I believe we laid it out for 60% of that class period, which is pretty typical to what they would see when you break down a typical day or typical class period. You have some type of instruction, some type of guided work, some type of independent work, so that instruction from the teacher plays out to about 60% of that time that they are on that class period. If a student is unable to attend if they're sick, if there's health reasons, if there are technology and connectivity issues, parents can call into the school and excuse them, and then it would just become a typical excused absence. And then those students would work with their teachers on the next day of attendance to make sure that they're gathering any missing work, or they're doing what they need to do to make sure they're staying pace with the rest of the class. All work is to be completed by the noted due date. That noted due date is determined by the teacher. Some of that might be the next in-person session that they have. It might be the next day. That due date might align with what is already outlined, so it might be a couple days down the road, but that will vary from teacher to teacher or assignment by assignment based on what the teacher has linked in through their Canvas courses. Do we want to do questions now? We only have... Perfect.
Yeah.
So then the next part is kind of outlining the teacher expectations to complement the student experience. Again, knowing that at 8 p.m. the night before, you have some time that you could prep outside if you wanted to and prepare those links on Canvas. We do encourage teachers now to go ahead and make a Google Meets link that you might have to recreate every so often, just so that it is posted on Canvas and that button is populated so that they're prepared for that. EC first grade, trying to balance the workload of what would be the 2nd through 12th grade teachers during the day. While they have the 3 office hours on the actual e-learning day, they will be putting in 3 to 4 hours ahead of time right now, leading up to parent conferences to prepare the blizzard bags. And so that looks to try to equal out what I'm doing on an e-learning day as a 9th grade teacher versus our 1st grade teachers, although the office hours are a little bit more condensed. It's not just a matter of photocopying things, but it's also getting materials, dice if they need it, rulers, decks of cards, those types of things, then making sure we have those available starting at parent conference time. All teachers are asked to post those Google Meets link. And like I said, double check it and refresh it. If it's one that you have previously posted just when your Canvas opened at the start of the school year, that time that you have right in the morning before classes start, that's a great time to check that link and make sure if there's anything specific for the actual lesson on that day that needs to be posted up there as well, or email communication as needed at any grade levels. The EC5 teachers have that collaboration time naturally built into their schedule, but the other 3 grade spans, the 3-8 at Kipla, middle school and high school, we've slightly adjusted and pushed back that start time of period 1 so that everyone had some kind of prep or initial kind of checking of our prep prior to students logging on into that Google Meets time. Like Patrick said, then when everything's kind of up and ready, students will log on, teachers will open that Google Meets room, remind them of the student etiquette and expectations within Google Meets, making sure your camera is on. Our staff will take attendance. Attendance will be taken in our system, Infinite Campus, and then we will of course check that with the school office to see who has called in. Our early childhood and first grade attendance will be assumed attendance until those blizzard bags come back the next school day. And then we can always go back and adjust based on who wasn't able to complete the work for more accurate attendance. Teachers need to think about what types of activities at the time, knowing like sometimes you have a little bit of a prediction something's coming, so you can kind of look at the sequence of learning that you are in and think if it was on a Tuesday, what would it be if it's coming up closer to the end of the week, and start to prepare and make sure all of those documents are something that is accessible to whoever is within the learning process. Then the final expectations, because we wanted to go through our union categories, is our speak and non-classroom teacher expectations. If they don't have a specific group that they are joining the Google Meet, for instance, in some cases, a teacher may be joining a room that they are a one-on-one pair within that classroom. They may join that Google Meet, or they may be asked to just join others to help facilitate the process and assist students as need be within that time frame. Again, overall, our goal is really to get that 60% of that period time, the engagement, the discussion, mini lessons, sharing documents, and then having that application and work time for a portion of the period or the day or the content span, depending what grade level you're at. That is it. So we'll hold on questions until.
Yes, two other items I would note before I turn it over to the public piece. Number one, as Dr. Mumm briefly mentioned, we do have the requirement in the plan that we do need to meet with any collectively bargained groups that we have, and both of those meetings have taken place with their representatives to have the conversation. And then the other piece is, if this is board approved tonight, when it's board approved, it goes to the regional office of education for approval, then from there to the state board of education. So there are still, after the board takes action tonight, there are still follow-up steps that we need to do.
Okay. Well, at this time, I'm going to invite the public to come up and make any comments regarding the Kaneland e-learning plan, keeping in mind the guidelines that were presented before regarding public comment. So anyone who'd like to come speak. Give it a couple more minutes, seconds. Okay. Well then, with no further or no public comments, I will go ahead and close the public hearing at 7:28 p.m. Okay, so at this point then we will open the discussion amongst the board regarding approval of the Kaneland e-learning plan as presented.
I just wanted to say that I'm really glad to see that you front-loaded some planning time at the beginning of the day. I think that's really important, and I think those are really good strategy on your part, so I appreciate you guys doing that. I think it's good for our teachers, so thank you.
So I think, Mr. Riley, I think you mentioned this, but if, as much as I love the accuracy of whether people will provide us our information, let's say we have this information before 8 p.m. and the snow never comes. I think you touched on that, correct? What's the process for that?
Correct. So if, again, doing our best to keep in line with what the weather reports are, if there is a prediction of large snow, I can think to a couple years back when there was significant wind chills, but there was no snow, and we made the decision to institute an e-learning day. We would communicate that out, and that would be our plan for the following day. So if there was 15, 20 inches of snow predicted and nothing came, we would still, because we've communicated that out to our public, there may already be childcare that's been arranged, transportation that's been arranged. So rather than to have to undo all of that, we would continue with that e-learning day once it has been called. After 8 p.m., we would, if it came in the middle of the night, if we weren't expecting things and we got hit unexpectedly, we would then just institute a regular what traditionally was a snow day, which would have no obligation from the community to attend to any kind of learning. That day then would get tacked on to the end of the calendar. If we use an e-learning day, that is just our day of learning, and that does not get tacked on to the end. So that 8 o'clock, we, in working with our union, jointly thought that that would be the best time to be able to communicate that out, to wrap our brains around, get things ready to go for the next day. So that's what we use as our cutoff day, or excuse me, cutoff time.
What kind of burden does this put on the teachers, given that they have 8 p.m., that 8 p.m. kind of basically notice, and having to plan for a whole day of e-learning? My fear is that, I'm not in the classroom every day, and obviously it's a different world now, so I'm sure a lot of the resources are already online, but I'd hate for a teacher to hear this information at 8 p.m. and be scrambling till 1 or 2 in the morning just to be prepared for the next day.
Yep, and certainly don't want that to happen, to be up that late. As far as curricular tools are concerned, the vast majority of what we use is accessible online. Digital textbooks, digital science labs in some instances. So those resources are available. I can't answer that question on a whole. For some, it might be a burden. For some, they may have that entire week planned out or 2 weeks planned out, so they have a pretty good idea of what that next sequential lesson may or may not be. So we wanted to couple that with, if we do know, as we look at the weather and we know, I don't think we're necessarily going to push it right up to 7:59. If we can see that by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that some pretty severe weather's coming through, we've talked about with our principals to make sure that they're sending messages out to our teachers that, hey, it is likely that some inclement weather is coming, so you might want to make sure you have materials or anything that you would want to use in a Google Meet session. And then with the way that we rearrange those schedules, speaking to our K-5 teachers in their regular day have an 8 to 8:35 collaboration time before they're in front of students. Our 612 teachers, they saw students right away at 7:25, 7:35. So for our 612, we wanted to build in that time where they can do a little bit more of that planning to try to alleviate some of the stress from the night before.
So it sounds like we have a commitment from administration to notify them as early as possible. That way we can give them as much time as they need to prepare for the.
Correct.
So I got a quick question. So I understand this is for emergency days. Inclement weather, say we have a freeze.
Mhm.
That freeze causes, say we have issues with the boilers. Say we're talking 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We don't have a time frame to get them repaired. Everybody's at home. Is this what's going to carry forward, or is there going to be something totally different if something like that happens?
That's a good question. I can answer that one. You can only use it for the maximum of the 5 days that you have built in for your emergency plan.
Okay.
So if there were some catastrophic event in one of our buildings, we would have to come up with an alternate plan for where those students could continue to learn and be on site.
Okay, so you said 5 days. So what? Or you answered.
It depends on what building, what happened.
happens.
There'd be a contingency plan
Okay.
put in for an alternate site to attend.
Okay.
Can you speak to, I know we had these plans during COVID. What happens now for our families that maybe don't have Wi-Fi at home or don't have internet access? What are we doing to provide for them?
Yeah, great question. We do have some of that data still and have looked into that a little bit. We also have our buildings that are able to access, if we have families that we know had struggled previously, a little bit, we relied a little bit on them reaching out to our district, but we do have a sense of families that may, either the area that they live in, financially might need a little bit more support. So we do have, if you remember from that time, we were able to purchase, I want to say it was 40 to 60 wireless jetpacks. So we are able to send those out to families if there is a need. Not perfect plan, but we still do have a lot of that data at the building level to be able to reach out. Again, I think Dr. Layden said October 25th is the first time, 26th is the first time that we would be able to use that. So that's a lot of that work that we would do ahead of time, is reaching out to our buildings, to our secretaries to say, A, do we have those lists still? Or B, can we start to put some feelers out in the community for those that may need that?
And along those same lines, because of the fact we would want to call it, or we need to call it by 8 o'clock, we would have principals announce to their students and to their families that students should bring home their Chromebooks to make sure that they're charged. And at the same time, those students that we've identified that may need that, they would also then hopefully stop by those main offices or their technology department to pick up any hotspot that they might need for the following day.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that if, oh, sorry. Mr. Kleisner, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I was really hoping to do public comments to just see what, from a parental standpoint and the community was thinking. But my question is, have we had any feedback from teachers on this plan? Is this something that the teachers are really in favor of, that they want to continue learning and keeping the things going? Or is this, something the teachers are like, I mean, we'll do what we have to do, but this is not ideal situation?
As I met with our teacher group, I met with two different groups. I met with the exec board representative team, and then also with our ARs. And as we talked through this, I think part of the positive piece was some of the feedback that we received and some things that needed maybe shifting or adjusting or some extra time and latitude for staff. And so I think within what we could do to allow that time, we've been able to shift and adjust it. But it wasn't, Board Member Kleisner, it wasn't a survey. It wasn't to all staff if they like it or don't like it. It was representative groups that we met with to try to get the general feedback and to make the shifts and adjustments that we could to make it as impactful as possible. Because I think the biggest challenge is at the middle school and in the high school, each emergency day that we use, snow day, that tacks a day onto end of the school year. And those days now end up making our semesters and our quarters even more unbalanced, because our semesters are about off by 8 or 9 days right now, with the spring already being longer than the fall. So any day in the fall that we use a snow day or an emergency day, that just makes the semesters even more unbalanced. So part of the continuum of learning and trying to balance the semester, both of those are factors that we had to take into consideration.
Got it. The one thing that kind of keeps coming to my mind in recalling our time with COVID is a lot of the burden falls on parents. And that's the tougher thing. And I think at the high school level, not so much. I think the high school students would be able to jump on their Chromebooks and follow up with it if they so chose. And I understand, having a high school student myself, they're not the most motivated when they're at home. But I think, for the younger students, I think the burden really falls on the parents. And I think this is tough because, as parents, and you guys know, we don't really get snow days. So, I mean, if we have to stay home or have alternate means of someone taking care of the kids, say it's a grandparent or aunt or uncle or something like that, then the burden really falls on them to try to understand what they're supposed to do, make sure the kids, the students are, sitting down with the camera on, doing what they're, and kind of babysitting it, while most likely trying to work from home themselves. And I guess that's my bigger concern, is the burden on the parent, having to work as well as trying to manage the student e-learning for one emergency day. And I do understand it adds a day to the semester. I do get that as well. I'm just trying to think of the extended picture of this, of what it's going to look like at the home, scrambling 8 o'clock at night, trying to, there's going to be alternate means of, childcare or, deciding to work from home for the day or whatever the case may be in every household. But I think the additional part of that, of having to not only try to manage your own workload, but then your students' workload at the same time. So that's why I was kind of hoping to hear a little bit of feedback from, from the public as well. I don't think there was any survey sent out to the public on this one, was there?
No.
Okay.
No, there was no survey on this one. It was, I guess we could have always have done that, but followed the state statute steps that we needed to get to this point, Brian.
No, I like the idea. I like where we're coming from, to try to keep everything moving. But I also remember being a kid and a snow day coming up, and I can't imagine the last thing in my mind that was to sit down, and try to do some schoolwork from home and join these classes and stuff like that. I think it's amazing we have the technology. I think we have the opportunity to do this. I'm just trying to think of the extended implications for the working parents and the that don't have maybe not have that extra time to be able to sit down with their younger students, and even the middle school students are a little bit more difficult to nail down. I recall spending quite a bit of time with my daughter in middle school during COVID, trying to help her manage the Chromebook and getting connected to the right things, and and just staying on top of her in general to follow up with what she was doing. So, and that was after some time of being in COVID and knowing this is what we're doing every day for at least a while. So to have one kind of contingency emergency day, here and there, I'm concerned that it'll be, and I know it was already talked about, we see how it goes, and if there's bad attendance and bad connectivity, and it really doesn't actually get the things done, then we can kind of reevaluate. But so those are just some of my thoughts, not to play complete devil's advocate, but I just want to throw that out there. Thanks for listening.
So I was going to piggyback on Board Member Kleisner's ideas here. So Ryan, I think you brought up a lot of really important points. I think these are things that we have to weigh. And I think one of the problems we have is getting a pulse on the community is always a challenge for us because first, we don't have a community. We've got many communities. And two, we have to be careful about always asking for surveys because we start getting into that survey fatigue, right? So is this one of those things that we do need a survey for? Is this one of those things we don't need a survey for? This is always the balance we're trying to figure out, right? And that's our challenge. And I think you're right. I think getting a pulse on what the community would like is useful. But on the other hand, I also think, I think you guys have put together a strong plan, and I think it's a very doable plan. I think we have buy-in from our union groups, right? So that's a positive, and I think that's where we're at, right?
What is the reversal process? Not reversal. What is the process? So let's say we implement this, we try it, and you guys both mentioned that at any point we could revert back to traditional snow days if we felt like this wasn't working or non-productive. What does that process look like in terms of approval? Does administration have the discretion to make that call, or would we have to put it off to the next board meeting? Do we have to make the call that we're reverting back? How does that look?
No, I think what we would do is if after 1 day or 2 days in a row, we would seek some immediate feedback. We would get that feedback, and if we find that our students are not engaged with that feedback, we probably have to do it for probably at least, if it was 2 days back to back, it would have to be both of those days to utilize it, then get that feedback. If it was just 1 day, we could get the feedback after that and see if it's, to see what degree it's discernible, and we could tell this is truly the feedback. 25% of our students logged in, the other 75 did not. Then at that point, we could, again, this is approved to be able to use. It's not required to be able to be used. So I think that's what you're looking for, the distinction between those two things, and it would be based on the feedback from staff and students based on how many actually logged in and participated.
And it's limited to 5 school days per school year?
Per year, yes.
Per year?
Yep.
Okay.
Based on the 5 emergency days that you have built in, you see at the end of the calendar.
Correct. Okay.
Does approving this plan approve it indefinitely, or do we have to reapprove it annually?
It's good for 3 years.
It's good for 3 years.
And then if like I said, based on the feedback, if it needs to be shifted or adjusted, we could bring that back to the board and talk about that. And if it is shifted to something different, then it would need to a different e-learning plan that would need to be approved by the board. But if it was just determined that we would not use it, that doesn't need the board approval piece.
Has
So
this model, sorry,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, has this model been used anywhere else or another school, and do they have any data? And
The data piece, I'm not sure of. I do know that, this is just anecdotally, most districts that I've talked to have a synchronous type of learning day in their plan. I do know some larger districts that have approved plans that are asynchronous, and that is just as we looked at the quality of instruction and quality of learning for our students, something that we did not want to bring forth of just doing worksheets throughout the day. So we wanted to make sure that our students had a contact point several times throughout the day with their teacher. So there are the majority of plans that we've seen in talking with the curriculum directors from Kane County all tend to be similar plans in the sense that it is some type of synchronous Zoom or Google Meet meeting with their teachers.
We do have one, it's not one of our comparable districts, but we do have a surrounding Kane County district that, excuse me, that would use 1 or 2 snow days first, and then after that, then they would determine how long that their leave might be. I don't know if it's as long as you mentioned, Mr. McCauley, but if there was an extended leave, they would, then determine it by grade span or by building what they would do moving forward. And the other thing to note, which is really interesting, is the fact that this process started like 2016 through 2018, and there were like 6 or 7 pilot groups across the state of Illinois that were doing this REACH program called virtual learning or online learning. And then there were only a few doing that, and then they were going to give feedback to the state. And as they were getting ready to give that feedback, that was about the 2019 school year. Then, as you know, it all shifted, and then there were requirements to do that. So this topic 6 years ago was a stretch topic that most people weren't even doing, but now based on COVID and based on what happened with that and based on one-to-one, there are more districts that revert to this. And the districts are probably split 50-50. Some still do snow days, some do virtual days, and some are very strongly vested in which their plan is going to be. And Mr. Raleigh, just for a quick review, can you just share again the difference between synchronous and asynchronous? I know those became very popular words during COVID, but just a reminder of the difference between those two.
So a synchronous learning day would be one in which the student is engaging in a live instruction with the teacher through an online platform. So for Kaneland, it's through a Google Meet link. Asynchronous would be when a teacher posts work. It could be a website they need to visit and read. It could be a novel they need to read. It could be worksheets that they can digitally post to Canvas, but there is no contact with the teacher. It is self-driven by the self-driven by the student on their own time. There is no live interaction with a staff member.
Thank you.
I just got one more question. So I work, my wife works. I got 2 young ones in grade school. If I'm trying to work and then I'm trying to get them in front of the computer and trying to get them to do what they're supposed to do, they're not doing what they're supposed to. Are students going to be penalized, even if it's grade school up to high school, if they don't even log in or not able to access Wi-Fi or not even able to complete their whole assignments? How does that work then?
As far as accessing that, no. I think what would happen in that circumstance is that we would work with the family. So if there is connectivity issues, and I know sometimes, excuse me, depending on the number of devices that are linked, it might just bog things down and slow things down. At any time, that parent could call into the district and say, or to the building and say, we are having connectivity issues. We are going to call and excuse our child, and they're going to be absent for the day. And that would be similar, it would be the same as any excused absence into the building. That student then would need to touch base with the teacher, and the teacher would need to contact them the next time they're together to say, hey, here's what we missed in the afternoon, here's what you missed during that day, and build in some of that makeup work time or some of that makeup instruction. As far as being penalized for that, no, that I can't see a situation where a student would be negatively impacted for a situation where they're trying their best at home, but there are circumstances beyond their control.
And again, even if it's not technology, if it's just, I'm trying to work, I'm trying to check up on them, they're running around, pretty much all circumstances, regardless of technology, they would be.
It's a great question. We have it outlined as health, connectivity issues, disciplinary, yeah, inability to attend to a Zoom meeting sounds connectivity-ish. But I think that then would fall onto the parent to see if it is constantly checking in with a child that's not able to attend. I think the best interest of that child may be an excused absence, where then they can go and attend to that makeup plan of whatever that would look like.
The other opportunity too is that family later in the day, after things settle down, work settles down, all of the things that they covered are on Canvas, which can be accessible by the family at a later time. Maybe you just kind of call it for that during the daytime, but then after dinner, we kind of circle back and look at Canvas and see if we can do a couple things so that they are having the ability to have some of that learning prior to returning.
I appreciate just you explaining the nuance, because as a parent, I would just think, take a snow day, add it to the end of the year. Realizing now, like you're saying, that is actually a burden to teachers. It's a burden to the kids and everything in schedules. I think of students, high schoolers with their finals and stuff and missing time. And obviously we live in Illinois, so this kind of weather happens in this first half of the year. So I think that's maybe some of the communication too, that parents need to understand that just taking a snow day is not just taking a snow day. There is a ripple effect for the students and for the teachers, especially like our high schoolers when it comes to finals. Is there any other nuances that we don't know as parents that you are aware of?
Yep, before we started actually writing the plan last year, we looked at our attendance trends, K-12, and we have about a 5 to 10% decrease on years that the snow days have gone past Memorial Day. And so even though our calendar does say, here's our last day plus these 5, vacations start right after that last day. And so we do start losing a portion of our population. Especially like we had, it was closer, I think it was 2 to 4% when the snow day was like the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday right before Memorial Day, but the Tuesday, Wednesday we had to come back for our final makeup days. We were down in some cases 12%. On average, it was somewhere between that 5 to 10.
Because when we add days, we shift finals, right? So, okay. But if we don't add days, then we're not shifting finals, and so then consistency for our students. I just want to be aware. As a parent, I wouldn't have made those connections.
And as a family, more about like our end day is our end day when you don't get into all 5 of those.
Thank you.
So the heat day that we had, that's going to get tagged on the end of the year.
Yes.
Okay.
Last day has been pushed back.
And then last year we just had 1 snow day, correct? 1 emergency day?
No, I don't think we used any last year.
Or there was none, I'm sorry.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep, there were none last year. So we didn't get to implement our plan. And my goal would be is to have good weather this winter and not have to implement it again.
So I have a question for actually Mr. Cook, because you've most recently been in this environment. You've probably done e-learning days. Do you have an opinion in terms of the experience of you and your peers?
This is a much better plan than I use. We had e-learning days before COVID, even when I believe Mr. Raleigh referenced those wind chill days. I think that was 2018 or 2019. And we had a few of these e-learning days, and they were not as well planned as this is. And they went smoothly, but I believe this is a very good plan, and I think this will work well. I get from the parents' perspective, getting a child, obviously I was in high school, I wasn't 3rd grade, but as long as the discipline and they get in front of the screen, I think it works very well.
Okay, any further discussion? Mr. Kleisner, you're good?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. So at this time, then I thank you, Mr. Williams. I appreciate it. At this time, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the e-learning plan for emergency days as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. McCauley,
Nay.
Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky,
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner,
Okay.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-2. Okay.
Thank you. I'll submit this to the Regional Office of Education and then also to the State Board of Education following the protocols outlined in the state statute.
So, at this point, we will move on to the superintendent and board reports. Dr. Layden, take it away.
Yes, I have 2. Thank you. First one is Wednesday night. We have our first of our Kaneland Connects committee meeting. If you recall, the previous 2 years, we had our Kaneland Connects meeting, but it was divided into the 5 commitments, and each of the 5 commitment teams had 2 or 3 meetings per year, and it was more untenable because of the number of committee meetings. This year, as you know, we've combined them into one committee and meets 3 times Wednesday night. I think there's a January meeting and then an April meeting. So there are 3 meetings. And so our Kaneland Connects committee meeting is Wednesday from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock over at the KMAC building this Wednesday. And then secondly, just as a reminder, we have no school on Monday, October 9th, which would typically be our first board meeting of the month. Instead, that meeting, due to no school, is moved to Wednesday, October 11th. So our next board meeting is on the 11th. It is not on a Monday as typical, based on our day off in October. Okay.
Dr. Julianne Fuchs had something come up, and so she's not able to be here, and she was going to give us some information on the most recent Health Insurance Committee meeting. Board Member Simmons was there, though, and she's graciously agreed to give us an update.
So, yes, this was my first time joining. Adam had been on the board, on the committee prior to this, and so it was my first. It was nice because we all had a new introduction. We all got to meet each other. But the most important part is we have a new broker. They're called Horton, and so they did a wonderful job sharing with us exactly who they are, their team, and just the impact and the things that they're looking at, and some of the changes that they're going to be able to make in a positive way to really make an impact on all those that are insured through the school. They went through their plan performance review. They talked about population health. The coolest thing, one of the reasons we picked Horton, because this is, again, a new health broker for us, is because they have a nurse on staff, and she focuses a lot on population health. And the idea with that is seeing what's going on, what are the top things that are the most needs, and just watching the trends, and then providing that information. Is it education? Is it coming here doing like blood pressure clinics or something, things like that. And so it's really nice that they have that add on to their staff, that she is going to be focused on that. So I think that's a huge positive for our staff and for family members that are part of the insurance. So I'm excited. Again, this is our first year with Horton. They seem to be excited to be with us too, and they've already been in motion with Julianne and with everybody else that is a part of it, Jackie too. And so I'm excited. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you
That's
for sitting on that committee
Oh, yeah.
as well. Appreciate it. All right. Is it Fottenhauer? Is that correct?
It's a long O.
Longo? Fotenhauer? Fotenhauer, please.
Okay, for tonight, I just have a few updates for the high school. So as you may have remembered, hearing during my last report, the theme for this year's homecoming is Once Upon a Time. Student Council is still working hard to prepare for the upcoming dance. During this week, homeroom classrooms actually get the opportunity to decorate their doors, with October 2nd through the 6th being the high school spirit week. On Monday, it's Sleeping Beauty, which is pajama day. Tuesday is Princess and the Frog, which is duo day. Wednesday is class colors, with freshmen wearing yellow, sophomores wearing green, juniors wearing blue, and seniors wearing purple. Thursday is royalty versus peasant, and Friday is night out, which is wearing Kaneland colors and Kaneland gear. A few activities that are happening that week at the high school include Wednesday, October 4th, being the homecoming parade in Sugar Grove, and following the parade is the Powder Puff game. And then for those who are unfamiliar with Powder Puff, it is a voluntary flag football game between the junior and senior girls. Friday, October 6th is the homecoming football game against Marengo. And then lastly, Saturday, October 7th is the day of the big dance, which starts at 7 p.m. For recent sports wins, girls varsity tennis finished in first place at the Lady Hub Varsity Invite. They received 20 points, with first place finishes being first doubles, second singles, and third doubles. Varsity volleyball recently took second at their own tournament, overall going 15-7. Senior Brian Davis led the boys golf team to a third place finish also, and boys freshman and sophomore golf finished ace at the DeKalb Invite. Boys varsity soccer won against Ottawa Township 5-1. As for boys cross country, seniors David Volkanoff and senior Colin Rutman helped lead the team to earn the 2023 Rock River Run Boys Varsity title. Lastly, varsity football won against Ottawa Pirates 49-15, and then this Friday they traveled to Sycamore to play against the Spartans. And then unfortunately, girls varsity golf fell to Batavia 186-208, and boys junior varsity golf fell to Wheaton Academy 181-193. As for the band, they placed second out of 3 teams at the Red and Black Fall Classic. And then, kind of like to input a little something that I'm a part of, the Kaneland Crier has been working hard since the beginning of the school year to put together the first issue, which will be coming out September 28th. And then, for those who are unaware, it is a never-ending process, as even before the first issue is released, we are already starting to work on the second. That is all I have for tonight.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Dr. Layden, so the parade is in Sugar Grove. Where, location, and time, or where can family members obviously are getting emails about it, but people that don't have kids in the district anymore, where can we find that information?
I'll make sure, I'll meet with our Director of Communications and make sure that we have that information online at the district website in addition to the high school website.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, topics for future agenda. So the first topic we already discussed earlier, the first responder discussion for the high school. So that's already been listed on here for a topic of future agendas. I have one, but I'll let you guys go first.
Standard-based grading, maybe sunset.
Yep, that topic is on the agenda for the next board meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
So mine actually piggybacks on board member Mankivski's from a couple months ago, I guess a month and a half ago. But I'd like to have a discussion regarding all the contracts that the district is currently engaged in. Specifically, length of contracts. I'd like to see monetary amounts and just kind of get an overview. It's a new board, and we'd like to at least see that information to see, what's going on from a financial perspective. That's what we have to do.
Yep.
Is that
we
okay
make
with
sure there's a
everybody?
consensus, yes, then we will. Okay. There's a consensus on that.
We have
I'll
a
make sure-
digital thumbs up, Brian, or down? Or
Digital thumbs?
audio. Thank you.
I will look at the, I know that the next meeting, there are already a number of new business items. We'll look at it and we'll place it accordingly before we have other items that do come up to bid. We'll make sure that we have that conversation with our board first.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else? All right, let's move on to round 2 for public comments. Is there anyone signed up? No. Would anyone like to address the board around 2? Okay. Well, then that's pretty much concludes the open meeting portion of this. The board is scheduled for the closed session to discuss the Illinois Open Meetings Act, Section 2C2, 2C1, and 2C11, whereas there will be no action taken following the session, and therefore, after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. I will entertain a motion to go into closed session at 8:03 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and a roll call, please.
Mr. Mankivski,
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner,
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons,
Aye.
Mr. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. McCauley,
Aye.
Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.